that in a second. So in short, integration is, for me, a watchword. But not just integration for its own sake, appropriate integration appropriate to the goals, to the objectives of the organizations involved, right? Appropriate to the context, the social context, that how that context is nested in the rest of the region. So consider how to integrate across social and geographic scale. Consider how the goals of one jurisdiction or organization integrate with others, linking forward or backward, ramifying through the system. Earlier this morning, you heard about how there should be partnerships at different scales to foster food situations. One I'm aware of and part of is at the is between the USDA and the EDA, the Economic Development Agency of the federal government, to foster food hubs, right? Which has related to that cluster ag clustering slide I had up a little while ago. And I think very importantly pointed out by a participant in the circle that I was in earlier today, outreach and participation components of education. I think that by and large you all thought a lot about education, but we think, right? We think about, you pointed this out earlier today, how there's much more to education than meets the eye. From my perspective, important components of education beyond sort of the formal senses that we think of is in outreach and public participation in our efforts. So now let's have some examples of partners, regulatory approaches, and business models. All right. Additional partners you may not have considered. Future Farmers of America, yay. No, you know, hey, no, it's all right. You should be aware, if you're not, that Chicago has the oldest urban ag high school in the country, right? FFA literally runs that. They don't even have a student government outside their FFA. And we can talk a lot about that magnet school, right? And about, you know, it's how difficult it is to get into it and whatnot. But that's an interesting opportunity. It's an interesting resource. USDA AFRI program funded partners. USDA recently gave $35 million to 7 different university coalitions to advance the community regional food system, okay, around the country. And you should be aware that those folks are out there working. I'll wave my flag in that regard in a little bit. Local extension agents. Universities have service learning, high school chemistry classes, because there is the whole gamut of things, from soil testing, you know, through the whole variety of other activities. This is important partners we may have thought of. One of the things that was probably apparent to all of you is that we don't always know what we mean when we say things. One of my examples of this is when I tell my wife I love her, and when I tell my Lamborghini that I love it, right? Do I mean the same thing? No, of course not. The Lamborghini is a piece of junk, right? Compared to my wife. What did I just say? I'm sorry, that was a joke, people. I'm trying. I'm not making it in Vegas, am I? All right, so anyways, conceptually, the point is that the words do have different valence. They mean different things. And so I've had my students working for a couple of years on this thing called the food glossary. That's available on the web. It's a wiki. Some people are aware of it apparently. And it's got 400 different concepts that have to do with food system sort of work. They're not all finished yet, but they're available to anybody. And a number of classes around the country now, I understand as well, are going to be engaged in it. So that's nice. So, we'll just elaborate this. It's just a resource for you. Okay. Regulatory approaches. In principle, regulation is designed to constrain, right? That's your originating sort of principle. In principle, for our case, in this case, it needs to be generative and enabling. So it can be about, you can have regulations of all sorts. So for instance, in Wisconsin now, I can sell up to $6,000 worth of home processed food without subscribing to health regulations, because they assume that I'm going to do it right. Because, and that's not an unreasonable assumption. $6,000 is not, a small chunk of change. It's, it's a piece of money. So there's an enabling regulation, right? Another one is the repurposing alleyways in Baltimore in California. I mean, there's lots. Community land trusts associated with farmers markets. A really good example is the one in Ann Arbor. There's a history behind it that I've written about that I'd be happy to share with you. But the bottom line is that good ag land is protected close to the city center. All right. Business models, again, across different realms, processing, production, distribution, etc. Besides cooperatives, there are L3Cs, limited low profit liability corporations, which is a branch of the law that's now in about 12 different states. I think it was just recently here in Illinois as well. Nonprofits that spin off for-profit oriented and then take equity stakes to bring money back into the nonprofit. Right? I'm sorry, that's business speak, but we can talk about these things. Public-private partnerships, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Financing. What sorts of financing options might we have? Well, how many folks have heard of slow money? Is there a chapter here? There's a pretty big chapter in Wisconsin. There's a couple, actually. So you might want to see who's interested in fostering that. Smaller nonprofit organizations are often, family foundations are often sources of small capital. Microcredit groups, right? Let me just finish it. Personal, people think, oh, well, what about personal savings and programs that foster it? You can get started with relatively little money in ways to subsidize yourself with relatively simple products. Credit, extended credit to people, tax credits. So, and in this regard, you can look at something that the city of Minneapolis did, which is a nice, for their context, a nice list of financing resources. Yes, ma'am. You want to throw out a quick question? Okay, very good. So, final thoughts. We're one of those 7 universities that got a big AFRI grant, and we're working with communities in 7 different realms. The grant narrative itself, the 18-page version and the 2-page version, are both available at that webpage, so you can look and see what we're up to. But we're working across from production all the way through to policy, and it's just, we're a thrill. We're 6 months into this 5-year grant. We've done some work here in Chicago, in Milwaukee, our main cities that we're working in right now. And as much as anything else, we're trying to foster access, education, discover and help people achieve the goals that they have for themselves. Finally, there you go. There I am at Maxwell Street, 20 odd years ago. I look forward to, I don't have that hat anymore, but I still wear cowboy hats. And so I appreciate, you honor me with your attention. I appreciate your time.